Data Science Rabbit podcast with Michael Bagalman.
Welcome back to the Data Science Rabbit podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bagalman. This week, let's try something a little different. If you go online and search for all things innovation, you'll find that on their site, I write a column. It's called Data Science for Decision Makers, where I try to help business executives understand how they can benefit from data science. Now, in case you've been living under a rock, one of the hottest things in podcasting these days is coming out of a new project from Google called NotebookLM. NotebookLM.google.com. So you can upload some documents into your notebook and then tell the AI to generate two voices talking about those documents. So, I uploaded 5 of my columns, and today's podcast is simply going to be those two voices talking about me and my writing. And the two voices were very complimentary, but they couldn't pronounce my name consistently to save their lives. Not that they have lives, do they? Anyway, have a listen, see what you think.
Ever feel like, you're making decisions for your business and you're just kind of like working with limited information? Like you need more insight.
Yeah.
That's what we're diving into today, using data science to make better decisions.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to be a tech person to follow along, don't worry. We've got a great set of articles here by data scientist Michael Bagalman.
Right.
And he's really good at taking these kind of big, complex ideas and making them into something that, you or I could use in our businesses.
Yeah, what's great about Bagalman's work is that he really emphasizes how accessible all these tools are becoming. Like you said, you don't have to be a data scientist with, decades of experience to understand these concepts or even start putting them to work.
Yeah, for sure. Like that example he gives about, I think it's in behind the ad screen, about how algorithms can fine-tune ad campaigns, like as they're happening.
Right.
That's a whole different world than just putting your ad out there and hoping for the best.
Yeah, he calls it, it's like the difference between horse and buggy targeting and, SpaceX.
Okay.
So instead of just this broad approach, it's really these algorithms are analyzing tons of data to figure out exactly what people want and how to reach them.
So less about gut feeling, more about letting the data kind of show you the way.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, Bagalman gives this really, it's a bit of an out there example, but he talks about bronze-coated reticulating widgets. Now, obviously, the product itself doesn't really matter. But what's important is that the company selling these widgets was initially losing money, like $50 a sale.
Oof, yeah.
And then by leveraging an algorithm, they were able to zero in on the specific type of customer who actually wanted to buy these widgets.
So instead of wasting their ad dollars on people who would never buy, a bronze-coated anything, they found the right people.
Exactly. They were able to target their ads more effectively, really hone their messaging, even figured out the best time of day to actually get these people to click.
Wow.
And he says they turned that campaign profitable in a matter of days.
Right. That's pretty compelling. So how much of this is like true machine learning and how much of it is like, I don't know, magic?
It can seem like magic, but really what we're talking about is harnessing the power of data. And machine learning is, at its core, it's a type of AI where computers learn from data without needing us to tell them exactly what to do in every single scenario.
Okay.
So imagine like giving a computer a goal, let's say sell more widgets.
Right.
And then just feeding it mountains of data.
Yeah.
Past customer behavior, market trends, what your competitors are doing.
Okay, so it's almost like having this always-on, like super analyst just looking at the data, crunching numbers 24/7.
You got it. And this algorithm, it's sifting through all of that, identifying patterns, and then it uses those patterns to make predictions about what's going to work best in the future.
Sign me up. That sounds amazing. But I do have to ask, with all this talk about AI, is there still a place for, good old-fashioned human intelligence? Or are we all just going to be, taking orders from robots soon?
Absolutely not. Bagalman is a big proponent of what he calls human oversight. And he even jokes that sometimes executives need to, nod wisely.
Yeah.
When their data science teams start talking about algorithms, even if they don't fully understand what's going on.
Yeah.
The important thing is that these tools are powerful, but they're just tools.
Okay.
Right? You still need humans to provide direction, to interpret the results, to ask the right questions in the first place.
So it's less about me becoming a coding whiz and more about understanding like the potential of these tools
Mm.
and how they apply to whatever it is I'm doing.
Exactly. You need to understand what questions to ask, how to interpret the answers you're getting, and when to maybe trust your gut over what the data is telling you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So it's about using AI to make your own expertise even better, not about replacing it altogether.
Which brings us to large language models, or LLMs. Like, these things seem to be everywhere you turn these days.
Yeah.
And Bagalman mentions those a lot, especially in that article, how AI is redefining business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
He even talks about using ChatGPT to, like, help with his research, which I don't know if that's allowed.
I know, it's a brave new world.
Yeah.
It's getting harder and harder to tell what's okay and what's not.
Right.
But all jokes aside, what's really interesting about LLMs is their ability to process massive amounts of text-based data, the kind of stuff that would take, a whole team of human analysts weeks, maybe even months to get through.
Wow.
And LLMs can go through things like, financial reports or customer reviews, even market trends, you name it, and pull out valuable insights.
So it's like having a superpowered research assistant that never sleeps.
Exactly. And they can do it
Right.
all much faster than any human team ever could.
He gives that example of using an LLM to, like, analyze your competitors' earnings calls.
Right.
Which sounds a little like insider trading, but it's not.
Not at all.
Okay, good.
And that's the beauty of it. It's like, imagine being able to instantly know how those calls went, what the overall sentiment was, what the main takeaways were, even how those things have changed over time. That's incredibly valuable information for anyone trying to plan their business strategy.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so LLMs sound amazing, but they're not perfect, right? I mean, Bagalman even mentioned something about hallucinations.
That's right.
Which sounds kind of, like, spooky.
It does sound a little ominous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's important to remember that as sophisticated as these models are, they're not actually thinking like we do.
Right.
They're identifying these patterns in data and making connections.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those connections lead to outputs that, yeah, they sound believable, but they might not actually be true. And that's what he's getting at with the hallucinations. They're not always grounded in reality.
So use them strategically, understand their limitations, things like that.
Exactly. Think of it like you wouldn't just believe everything you read online, right?
Right.
You got to approach the outputs of these LLMs with the same kind of, like, healthy skepticism.
Okay.
Always good to double check and not be afraid to ask questions.
So it's that human oversight thing again.
Exactly. And this actually leads into another key point that Bagalman makes, which is you don't need to, completely revamp your business to start using data science.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, exactly. He's a big advocate for starting small, figuring out where AI can make the biggest impact, maybe just doing some pilot projects first.
So, like, dipping your toes in the water?
Exactly. You don't need to dive in head first.
Okay, good to know. Now, he gives some interesting examples of this, like using natural language processing. He calls it NLP.
Right.
To analyze customer service interactions, right?
Yes. So NLP, it's basically teaching computers how to understand and use human language,
Okay.
like we do.
Right.
And Bagalman talks about how companies like Uber are using this to, like, streamline all their customer support tickets, and American Express, they're using it to get real-time feedback from their customers.
So instead of having a team of people reading through thousands of emails and chats, you can use NLP to figure out what's going on and what people are really feeling.
Precisely. NLP can identify trends in that data, gauge customer sentiment, all that valuable stuff.
It's like they say, the customer's always right.
Right.
But now you actually have the data to figure out what they're saying and why.
Exactly. It takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
But one thing to keep in mind is that even with a powerful tool like NLP, the quality of the insights you get, it all comes back to the data you're feeding it.
Oh, okay.
Bagalman really emphasizes this point. You need accurate, relevant, and well-organized data for any of this to really work.
So it's garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. You said it perfectly.
Yeah.
And speaking of data, this is a good segue into another concept Bagalman talks about, predictive analytics. He's a huge proponent of using it for product launches, especially.
Which makes sense. I mean, he's led data science teams at, like, Sony, AT&T. These are big companies. He's seen it all. But for those of us who aren't data scientists, what does he actually mean by predictive analytics?
In the simplest terms, it's using data from the past to spot patterns and trends that help you make smarter predictions about the future.
Okay.
So instead of relying on intuition or gut feeling, You're letting the data guide your decisions.
So less about intuition, more about letting the data tell you what's coming next.
Right. And he gives this example of launching an electric vehicle, which seems pretty relevant these days.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's say you're this EV company, right?
Okay.
You could use predictive analytics to model pricing scenarios. You can forecast demand based on all sorts of things, like fuel prices, government regulations.
Right.
You can even get ahead of potential disruptions in the supply chain.
So it's like having a roadmap for the future, but instead of just showing you the roads, it also tells you like where the traffic is, where there might be construction.
I love that analogy. It gives you that extra layer of insight to help you make better decisions.
So you can plan your route accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Now, he also talks about using predictive analytics to like make decisions about product design. Like when Apple, they got rid of the headphone jack.
Right.
Big, bold move.
Definitely. And Bagalman speculates that Apple probably used a technique called preference modeling
Okay.
to weigh the pros and cons of that decision.
So they were using data to try to figure out how people would react to this pretty major change.
Exactly. And more importantly, whether it would actually be profitable in the long run.
Which it seems like it was, so.
It did okay.
Mm.
But, as with all of this stuff, there are definitely ethical considerations.
Right.
Companies have to be very mindful of how they're using this data, making sure it's transparent, always considering the potential impact on their customers.
Okay, yeah, that's important. Now, I know we've covered a lot, but before we get to like how people can actually use this stuff, I want to touch on one more thing. Bagalman talks about something called dimensionality reduction.
Okay.
Which sounds like something straight out of like Star Trek.
It really does, right?
Yeah, but also kind of useful.
Yeah, it can be very useful.
Okay.
At its core, dimensionality reduction is about taking these complex data sets and simplifying them, making them easier for us to understand and visualize.
Okay. He used this funny analogy, something about taking a group photo at like the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, Bagalman is great with those down-to-earth analogies.
Yeah.
He's got a real talent for that.
Okay, so walk me through it.
So imagine trying to take a group photo, but it's not just any group. It's like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, all these big names at Davos.
Okay, so you gotta like position everybody just right.
Right. And just like you'd strategically position people in that photo, maybe based on their relationship to each other or their roles, dimensionality reduction can help us visualize data in a similar way, highlighting the most important connections.
So instead of just staring at a spreadsheet full of numbers, which is like my personal nightmare, you can actually see the data in a way that makes sense.
Exactly. Instead of a jumble of numbers, you get a clear picture of what's going on. He talks about things like multidimensional scaling and perceptual mapping, which sound very technical, but they're really just ways to create those visuals.
And I'm guessing those visuals are a lot easier for us non-data scientists to grasp.
Absolutely. Charts, graphs, things like that, much easier to process than rows and rows of numbers.
Okay, so it's about making the data make sense. Got it.
Right. And what's interesting is how Bagalman suggests using this for things like mapping out your competition or even finding new markets.
He gives the example of like a movie studio using these techniques to see the relationship between films and their target audiences, right?
Exactly. They're able to see what works, what doesn't, who's watching what.
I bet they love that.
Oh, yeah. It's invaluable information. And the best part is you can apply this to pretty much any industry.
So it's like having a high-tech GPS, but instead of just showing you how to get somewhere, it's showing you all the potential routes, detours, points of interest you could hit along the way.
I like that, yeah. It's about using the data to brainstorm new ideas, find new opportunities, maybe even rethink your entire strategy. But just like you wouldn't want to rely on a GPS blindly in unfamiliar territory.
Right.
It's important to understand what the data is telling you.
Right. You still need that human element.
Absolutely. Don't miss the forest for the trees.
Okay, so use it wisely. But used correctly, it can be a really, really powerful tool.
Exactly. And that brings us to maybe the biggest takeaway from Bagalman's work. You need to strike that balance between, what the data is telling you and your own judgment.
Okay.
These tools are incredibly powerful. They can definitely help you make better decisions, but they shouldn't replace human expertise entirely.
They can't replace that gut feeling, right?
Exactly. Sometimes you just got to trust your gut.
Okay, so we've covered machine learning, LLMs, NLP, predictive analytics, even dimensionality reduction.
We really went there.
Yeah, it's like a crash course in data-driven decision-making.
It is a lot to process.
Yeah.
But the main thing to remember is These tools are out there, and they're only becoming more accessible.
Right. It's not just for the big companies that have tons of money to throw around anymore.
Exactly.
But where do you even start? I mean, I'd imagine a lot of business owners are probably feeling a little overwhelmed right now.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
But Bagalman actually gives some really practical advice for people who are just getting started.
And it doesn't involve going back to school for like a whole degree in data science, does it?
Definitely not.
Okay, good.
He emphasizes starting small.
Okay.
You don't have to do everything at once.
So like dip your toe in, test the waters a little bit.
Exactly.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Don't try to boil the ocean.
There you go. Yeah.
Find a specific area where you think data can help you.
Okay.
Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's customer service, and just start experimenting.
Okay, so pick one thing and go from there.
Exactly.
He also talks a lot about like the importance of good data, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's that garbage in, garbage out thing we were talking about earlier.
It's worth repeating.
Okay.
Even the most powerful algorithms in the world can't work miracles if you're feeding them bad data.
Right.
So before you even think about AI or machine learning, take a close look at your data.
Make sure it's accurate, it's organized, it's actually relevant to what you're trying to figure out.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. There are tons of resources out there, consultants, online courses.
Right, you don't have to do this alone.
Absolutely not. And that's another crucial point that Bagalman makes.
Okay.
Building a data-driven culture,
Yeah.
it's not just about hiring a data scientist and calling it a day.
Right, it's got to be like a team effort. Right.
Exactly. It's about getting everyone on board, making sure everyone understands the value of data.
So like getting the whole team speaking the same language.
Precisely. Even if that language involves things like algorithms and neural networks.
Right, because that can be intimidating.
It can be.
Yeah.
But the more comfortable people are, the better.
So it's about encouraging people to ask questions, to try new things, maybe even to fail sometimes.
Exactly, because that's how we learn and get better.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall down a few times, but eventually you figure it out.
Exactly, and you never know what you might achieve once you find your balance.
So as we wrap things up here, I want to leave everyone with this thought.
Okay.
What's one decision in your business, big or small, that could benefit from, looking at the data?
It's a great question.
What insights are you missing out on because you haven't really tapped into this whole data thing yet?
Food for thought.
Yeah, right.
The answers might surprise you.
They might, and it could be the start of something really, really amazing.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
It's been fun.
It has, and as always, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the Data Science Rabbit Podcast, hosted by Michael Bagalman. Find the Data Science Rabbit Podcast on all your favorite social media, including YouTube and TikTok. Follow Michael on LinkedIn or visit datasciencerabbithole.com.